Welcome to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast, calling in over the phone from an area north of Seattle, is my guest, Emily Tomkinson. Welcome to the podcast, Emily.
Thanks, Richard.
Emily and I have been exchanging Facebook messages since 2017, about 3 years, and she's felt safe enough to open up to me with some of her journey, and I really respect Emily. And now she feels comfortable doing a podcast. This podcast will come out roughly the third week of September. Just a housekeeping thing. I've been plugging my book that is coming out about the same time. Encourage all of our listeners to get the book. It's called Listen, Learn, and Love, Embracing LGBTQ Latter-day Saints, the foreword by Steve Young. It's meant to be supportive of our church, our leaders, our doctrine, and also supportive of LGBTQ members, those that stay in the church, and also trying to create more common ground with those that step away, since we are the same human family. And I've been getting really good reviews on Amazon from some of you that have bought the book, probably the Kindle version. Really grateful for that. The book is at Siegel Book for those of you that live near Siegel Book, and continue to update our listeners on where it's available. But grateful for those of you that are buying the book. And the book is really like the podcast, trying to bring voice to people like Emily, our LGBTQ friends, because they're the ones we're really trying to listen from. But as way of introduction, Emily is 40. She is lesbian. She no longer is active in the church. She is married to a woman. Her wife's name is Jess. They're the parents of twin 9-year-olds. Emily grew up in Provo, Utah, Provo High, spent some time, a couple years at UVU, has a career in tech. Emily was active in the church until her 20s, and maybe until 30, and then has stepped away from the church. And those of you that have been listening know that I'm fine doing podcasts with people that have stepped away from the church. And the reason why is I'm trying to bring common ground to people in their differences. And Emily is very respectful of the church. And so even though she doesn't participate in the church and the church didn't work for her, it's still a podcast about how we can find common ground. Many of you have family members in and out of the church, or friends in and out of the church, or you're a local leader and some of the people you serve are not active in the church. So I just think we're the same human family, and it's wonderful to host stories like Emily's. And so this is, how's that for an introduction, Emily?
That's pretty good. I forgot to let you know I also served a mission in Knoxville, Tennessee.
And what states did you serve in? Were you in Tennessee, or did you have other states around there?
It was East Tennessee, as well as Virginia, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Georgia. If I remember correctly. It was like teeny tiny corners of each of those states and the eastern half of Tennessee.
Thank you for your service. A lot of people's lives are better off. I feel pretty confident saying that, and I think you would agree with that. I've always felt like people that have stepped away from the church, we should always thank them for the time and the financial contributions and the service they've given to the church. The church is better off because of you, Emily, and maybe more importantly, people are better off because of you with your mission and your service. And my guess is that continues with the people in your circle. So thank you for your service. I have never been to Eastern Tennessee, so that's one part of the country I've never been. Talk about anything else from a bio standpoint.
Nope.
Let's start with, like we do in a lot of these podcasts, start with just what it felt like to be in high school in your 20s. And Emily identifies as lesbian, so we'll continue to call it Emily lesbian. We won't say that like every paragraph of the podcast, but I just want to get Emily's sexual orientation out there for our listeners and the label she takes on. But just start to tell us your story, Emily.
Yeah, absolutely. The very first time I remember feeling these feelings of attraction towards girls was when I was about 13. I remember it was summer break, and I was looking through my yearbook, and I came across a picture of a girl who I had become friends with, and I suddenly felt these feelings welling up inside of me of like being attracted to her, and it scared me. It really shocked me. And I just said, "Oh man, I got to push that down. I really have to push that down." It really came as a surprise to me. And then as I went through high school, what I found through high school and through my early 20s, every once in a while I would become friends with a girl, and I would just really be very emotionally attracted to this person. I wanted to spend all of my time with them. I looked up to them. I was so grateful to be their friend, and I just wanted to be with them all the time. And what happened a couple of times, I got too close, and I think the friend may have sensed it, and they pulled away. And the interesting thing is that was devastating for me. It honestly was as if it was a breakup, looking back on it now. At the time, I didn't know that. At the time, I didn't know that I basically had a crush on this girl. And so it left me with a lot of really, really confused feelings. It's just so interesting looking back on it now. I remember when I was about 18, I was talking with one of my best friends. He and I are still great friends today. And I was sharing with him these experiences that I'd had in high school. And I turned to him and I said, if I wasn't Mormon, I think I'd be gay. And I look back on that now, and I just spent so many years with being gay or lesbian just wasn't even an option. It just wasn't even like I said, when I was 13 and I had those feelings. And as soon as they came, I just went, whoa, 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 whoa. No, that's not allowed. Stop it. And I look back and I wish that I could have had a different perspective on things. The world was a different place then. It was very different 20 years ago than it is now. So I don't necessarily blame anyone for that. I'm grateful that teenagers today do have a little bit more acceptance when they have those feelings, but I'm sure that there are still some teenagers out there who have these feelings and just don't know what to do with them. So that pattern continued into my 20s of like becoming friends with a girl, and then like having these strong feelings, and then having things fall apart and just being devastated. And it wasn't until I was about 30 that I finally had this realization that, you know what, I like girls, and I probably shouldn't bury those feelings anymore. So that's kind of a perspective of what things felt like for me as a teenager and in my early 20s.
Thanks for being so honest and vulnerable, Emily. Pretty tender topic. And how do you if friendships are pretty normal? Friendships between men and men are pretty normal, and women are pretty normal. It sounds like these friendships were pretty normal, but at some point, mm-hmm. Can you just describe sort of where the sexual orientation, if possible, where the sexual orientation sort of entered the friendship, and then it became a situation where your girlfriend pulled away because of that, I guess.
Yeah. I think I didn't know what to do with those feelings.
That's honest. Yeah.
And so they translated into this kind of obsessiveness and clinginess. And so that resulted in the friend pulling away. To be clear, like in the moment, I did not have like sexual drive towards these people. I just had this very strong emotional connection. And I've heard very similar stories from my lesbian friends. So I think just in the way that men and women develop sexually, things might move along differently. But it was much more like, I would even at times like be listening to a love song, and I would think of them while I was listening to that love song, but I didn't necessarily like want to do anything with them. It was just this like obsessiveness, like a really strong crush, if that makes sense.
That's honest, and that does make sense. And it's helpful for our listeners, some that may be walking the same road you've walked, and it's helpful for them. Did you have the same sort of friendships with men that became more serious in the sense, I don't know if you just use the word clinging or dependent, but I don't want to misuse the words you use, but did that happen with men?
No, I never had the same type of, I never had that same scenario play out with a man. No.
Yeah, and that's what if any of these friends, this is a tender question, if any of these friends, what did they feel that caused them to pull away?
I think they felt smothered. I think also sometimes I saw more in the friendship than they did. So for them, it was just a natural, like moving on to other things. But I wasn't ready. Like in high school, you make friends all the time. You know, your friends come and go. And for a normal friendship, that's not a big deal. But when one person is like grappling with these strong feelings, it can be really difficult.
That's helpful, and I'm asking kind of tender questions. So thanks for being willing to answer some of these.
Yeah.
Just keep telling your story of talk about your emotional health and just any journey. I usually ask most guests if they've been suicidal or if they've had a suicide attempt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In my early 20s, I did attempt suicide when I was 24, I think it was. And I mean, it was honestly, it was about a girl, and it's hard for me to say that, but it was this same scenario that had already played out a few times before, and it happened again. And I felt like there must be something wrong with me, and I just felt totally defeated. I recently was reading back on some journal entries and from that time, and one of the things that I said before right before this all happened was that I was just tired. I was so emotionally spent and tired, and I was so sad because I'd had this friend who I really cared about so much, and then things went south, and it just made me feel broken. And I know that deep down inside, I always knew that I liked girls, but I just couldn't let it be true. And so I did. I took a bottle of pills, and then pretty soon thereafter I went to the ER because I panicked, and it was a really, really scary experience. And it was scary enough that I said, okay, I'll never do that again. I survived it, and my family was there for me. But I think everybody was kind of just like, well, what's wrong with Emily? And I couldn't really tell anybody. I really couldn't tell anybody because it was so shameful that it was just over this friendship, you know? But I've never been in that place ever again because it was such a scary experience for me. But I do remember having a conversation with a friend shortly after that happened and starting to really feel these feelings really well up inside. The feeling that I might be gay and just not knowing what to do about it. And I wish that I had had the courage to tell my friend this at the time. I remember trying so hard to spit the words out, and I just couldn't do it. And this was not a friend that I had a crush on or any. This was another friend. But I always knew. I just couldn't. It just couldn't get myself to actually come out and say it until I was about 30. And do you want me to kind of continue with the story, or?
Yeah, let me just, on behalf of our listeners, that was really brave, Emily.
Yeah.
Really brave of you to share that with us. We're so glad you're alive. Our Emily is, I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning, but Emily asked before we recorded that we start with prayer. I offered that prayer, and we just both hope and pray that this podcast will be helpful for you, our listeners, as Emily bravely opens up and shares her story. But I wrote down some of the words you used to describe how you felt during that time: totally deflated, sad, tired, broken, shameful. And I recognize that, this part of you that you couldn't talk about, didn't want to talk about, didn't want it to be part of you, just led to all these feelings. And I've always felt like, helping people come out and help, I don't think talking about LGBTQ or sharing a podcast like this is going to make more people LGBTQ, Emily. But I think what it does is help people to decrease the shame and the self-loathing and hating this part about them, so that then they're less likely to have a suicide attempt. They're more likely to talk about it with someone because it sounds like you want to. And they're more likely just to make more thoughtful decisions as they move forward. And so I think Satan's real, but I think one of his greatest tools is to cause you to feel shame and some of these things. And you had no way to navigate this. You were doing the very best you can. So there's no fault for you. I have one quote I share pretty consistently on the podcast when people talk about suicide. I didn't lose you, did I, Emily?
No, okay. I'm here. Sorry, I just was taking a drink of water.
I just heard a different sound. Sometimes I accidentally hang up on people, but I'll read this. Brene Brown has said that not belonging or physiological isolation is the most terrifying and destructive feeling a person can experience. It's not the
Mm.
same as being alone. It's a feeling one is locked out of the possibility of human connection and powerless to change the situation. In the extreme, physiological isolation can lead to a sense of hopelessness and desperation. People who do almost anything to escape the combination of condemned isolation and powerlessness. So, what do people like me do, or your friends or family? We embrace, we value, empathize, and we tell people like you they belong with us. As I may have mentioned, Emily has active LDS parents that are doing a good job. It's been a journey like all parents. She has 6 siblings, so she comes from a very active family. Um, I'm really glad that you shared that experience with us. What would you say now to people that are suicidal?
I would I would say that's a good question. The thing that comes to mind is tell me more. Not necessarily tell me more about why you want to kill yourself, but what are you feeling? Like, I'm here, no judgment at all. Just I'm here for you. I love you. What do you need? How can I help you? Um, because I think telling that person, like, I mean, obviously you don't want them to do it, but just saying like, no, don't do it. That's not what they need to hear. They need to be listened to and they need to be loved. Um, so no matter what you say to me right now, I love you. You know, what is it that's on your heart and your mind, and how can I help?
I like your answer, and it's a lot of just listening. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Um, I'm in this space because of the suicide of a gay Latter Day Saint young man at high school age. This book and all the proceeds are dedicated to his memorial scholarship. I think all of us can agree, as the same human family, that we want to do everything we can to help people not choose to die by suicide. And we're so grateful you're alive. And I think as LDS parents, we have this hope that all of our children will be active in the church, marrying the temple. But I think the reality of a lot of family situations, that doesn't happen. And I think as parents, we just need to leave it at the Savior's feet and control things that we can control. And that's keeping our family members alive and around us and close together. And to me, that's what our church teaches, is strong family relationships. So um, I I just recognize that, you have a harder road than our straight members do. And I just recognize that many of our gay and lesbian members, I don't invite them to go down this road, but if they self-determine or receive personal revelation that this is their path, I'll just honor that and leave it at the Savior's feet and say, what can I do? Well, I can continue to extend kindness and empathy and understanding and just try to support you the best way I can. I think it's a false dichotomy that to fully love and follow God, I need to stop loving some of his children. And
Hmm.
to me, the commandment is love the Lord with all thy heart and love thy neighbor as thyself. And there's no conditions on that. So I just see you as my neighbor, that because you're a daughter of heavenly parents, you're worthy of my love and support and friendship. And that's just the way I navigate this. I'm not really speaking to you, Emily, because I think you know that. Just listeners that may be listening for the first time, about this moderator who's an all in, fully believing Mormon supporting, I guess I'm a Latter day Saint now, fully supporting our church and trying to support wonderful people like you, Emily, and your good wife, Jess. Talk about being, unless you want to go talk any more about suicide, let's move on and just talk about
Yeah.
you were married to a man. Share with our listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Being raised as a woman in the church, you really are taught that the one of your ultimate goals in life is to find a spouse, to find a husband, to get married, settle down, and have children. And so that is what I wanted. And it's interesting because I really didn't date all through high school. I wanted to date. Boys didn't ask me out. And then in my 20s, I wanted to date, and I tried to put myself out there, but I just didn't get asked out on dates. And I understand why now. I not to say that I wasn't attractive, but I wasn't sending out that signal, if that makes sense. It makes sense to me now why that was the case. But when I was in my late 20s, I finally said, well, boys aren't asking me out, so I'm just going to have to go ask some boys out. And I'm just going to have to take this into my own hands because I need to get married. And so I did meet someone. I only dated a couple of people. My ex-husband was like the second person I ever dated. And he and I, there was a strong physical attraction between us. We ended up getting married civilly, and then we were still in the temple a year later. But I realized that so we were married in 2008. Is that right? Yes. We were married in 2008, and I came out of the closet like a year and a half later. And when I came out, I realized that I had married him for all the wrong reasons. I had finally found someone who found me attractive, and I was worried that I would never find that ever again. I was afraid of, what if I don't get married? Like I really need to get married. And so I felt that pressure to get married. It's difficult because I did love him. He was a really good friend. And I did love him. And so the process of leaving was actually a really, really difficult process. But I knew I had this experience. What happened was I met a girl who I found myself attracted to. And this was like a year and a half after I had gotten married. And in my head and in my heart, I was just like, oh no, not again. Like I thought that this was not going to happen again because I'm married to a man. This isn't supposed to happen. But this particular person was approachable enough, and she was kind of like a life coach to me. So I actually had the courage to basically go to her eventually and say, I think I might be gay. Like I think I said I think I might be bi, because I was having these feelings. And she was totally open and accepting and loving of me in that moment. And she said, oh, honey, I could have told you that months ago. And she said, so what are you going to do about it? I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do about it, but I don't think I should bury these feelings anymore. And she said, yeah, I don't think you should either. And I actually went home that very night, and I talked to my ex-husband, and I said, hey, I like girls, and I don't know what I'm going to do about it, but I don't feel like I should bury these feelings anymore. And I was shocked because he said, I agree. I don't think you should bury the feelings either. And he said, I always suspected, just based off of some of the stories that you've told me about your like past friendships. And he was he was very, very loving through the whole process. Um, I our divorce was peaceful, and we it was difficult at times. It was at first I really didn't know if I was even going to act on these feelings, right? Like I knew that I liked girls, but I didn't necessarily know if I necessarily wanted to like go out and date girls. But it was like once I was comfortable enough saying I like girls, all of these pent up feelings from so many years just started to spill out, and I felt so much freedom and love for myself that I had never felt before. And I just knew that um, it was okay. Like I like girls. I'm gay, and that's okay. And I I really did, but I still didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember I was talking to a friend, and just so you're aware, like I never had any romantic relations with anyone before my husband and I split, before we separated. Like we stayed together for a year after I had this whole coming out process. We stayed together for a whole year because I just wasn't sure what to do. But I remember talking to a friend and kind of venting to her, like, I just don't know what to do. And she said, imagine you had a crystal ball, you could have anything you wanted. What do you want? Like imagine you could have anything you wanted. And my answer was immediate. I said, I want to be with a woman. I want to be married to a woman. Like I want to be in a relationship with a woman. And that was just one of the affirmations that I received, that, you know what, your path is not with this man. You have a separate path that will bring you more happiness, and it will bring him more happiness, because you will not be able to love him the way that you would love a woman. And so we ended up separating, and then shortly thereafter I started dating women. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of how that went.
That's a really honest part of your story, Emily. And I just honor everybody's story. Um, talk talk about, you said there was a physical attraction to this relationship with your former husband. If someone heard that and said, well, how can you have a physical attraction and identify as lesbian? Help any thoughts for our listeners?
Um, I think I think sexual fluidity was definitely in play there. Um, I do think that it's, for some people, some people are bisexual. For some people, you can be attracted to both genders. I identify as lesbian because I know that I'm much happier with women. But the human body, like physical attraction, is very chemical, and so I think, you know, when I was in Utah, I moved to Seattle about 7 years ago. But when I was still in Utah and I was dating women, nearly every woman that I dated had been married to a man and then came out of the closet. And I think that they had all been Mormon or LDS. And there's just, like I said, there's just this strong message that is driven into you as a girl growing up in the church. You will marry a man, you will have children, and it's hard to get away from that. I think that a woman, I think that it's easier for gay or lesbian women to be attracted to men than it is for a gay man to be physically and sexually attracted to a woman. There's no science behind that. That's just my opinion. But based off of my experience and what I've seen and the people that I've known, that's one of my opinions.
And this is a podcast with just everybody sharing their story. And so I just honor everything you said. How do you feel about mixed orientation marriages that didn't work for you? How do you feel about those for other people? And do you believe all of those will eventually fail, or do you believe some of those can and will be successful?
You know, I feel like our Creator has a unique path for each and every one of us. So there may be some people who a mixed orientation marriage could work for them. I think it's risky. I think it's really risky, and those people who are able to make it work, I think they're very, very special. But I think everybody has their unique path, and it's just really important that people listen to their inner voice. The LDS people would say that you listen to the Holy Ghost and follow those promptings to really listen to that. I've listened to several episodes of the podcast, and one thing that I've been impressed by is just how often people say, I prayed to Heavenly Father and I got the prompting that I was supposed to do X, Y, or Z. And for some people that meant a mixed orientation marriage, and for some people that meant dating someone of the same sex or marrying someone of the same sex. I think as long as you're listening to that voice, that guide, and you were consistently checking in with it and just really checking it and making sure, then it's up to you. It's your journey. It's your path.
I really like what you said. And I think it takes a lot of maturity on your part, you were in a mixed orientation marriage and you went in that with the very best efforts to make that work. And it didn't work. So it would be very easy for you to justify or sort of validate your own position to say all of those are fake, all of those will fail. And I just recognize the maturity of you and the grace you're offering to our listeners and to people in mixed orientation marriages, that those can and do work. And it's not my job to take my story and make it everybody's story. And it's also, so there's a lot of really thoughtful maturity. I'm just going to I've got my physical book in front of me. I've never done this before on a podcast, actually read from my physical book. While the church doesn't encourage this road, meaning a mixed orientation marriage, and I'm on page 264, and some of these marriages fail, mixed orientation marriages can and do work for some. We should hope they succeed. Before I stepped in this space, the only mixed orientation marriages I was aware of were those that failed. I had falsely concluded from my limited sample size and understanding that all mixed orientation marriages failed. It was only after interviewing several couples in mixed orientation marriages that my conclusion changed. I actually felt a rebuke from the Spirit during one of these interviews. Now I understand these marriages can be beautiful and authentic love stories in which honesty, communication, vulnerability, power of and commitment to eternal covenants and common eternal goals create a strong and healthy foundation. I also assume my awareness of successful moms or mixed orientation marriages is limited, as there's likely many couples who are not sharing this part of their lives with others, and there should be no requirement to do so. And then I go on, I don't want to read the whole chapter of building some understanding when a mixed orientation marriage fails. And I write this: we sometimes hear of a spouse in a mixed orientation marriage and refer to them as the hero. I'm not sure any of us should judge who is more or less of a hero. I'm not sure any of us understand the complexities of another marriage to elevate one spouse over the other. But then I talk further in this chapter about the church's stance where they don't recommend this. The church has been very clear, but and there are some that fail, and we should just, support those couples and not try to judge either one person for making it fail. And just so I tried to write this chapter the very best way I can, because I prayed about it as much as any chapter to try to create space. We don't want any marriage to fail, but when it fails, I don't want to point my finger at you or your ex-husband, say it's your fault or his fault. Sometimes we try to do that. It keeps everything in a nice, tidy box for us. And if we can simply explain away why another person's marriage failed, perhaps it doesn't make us look inward and see what we need to do to improve our own marriage, or keeps us emotionally safe. So I hope, listeners, that when we are aware of any marriage that fails, that we just try to be kind to both spouses. Um, and because I think that's what Heavenly Father wants us to do as much as possible. So
Yeah.
I just think you've done the very best you can, and you've always wanted to be married to a man and have a family and live the dream. You taught that on your mission in Tennessee. So why wouldn't you? You had some,
Mm-hmm.
you had, I love that you proactively started to date. I think that's really cool, Emily. Gives me an insight to your character. And I love the way you just said, I'm going to do the very best I can, and tried that. And it sounds like you and your husband did the very best you could. And so we just continue to extend kindness and grace to you as you make your way forward. Um, so, and
Yeah.
so, you know, tell, I've just done a
Yeah.
bunch more talking than I
I have a
usually
quick
do.
thought, if
Yeah.
you don't
Share
mind.
some thoughts or anything you're uncomfortable with, I said you want to come back to.
Yeah, I just had a quick thought follow up on what you said just now about mixed orientation marriages, and as you were reading from your book, I one of the lessons that I've learned is that any decisions that we make in our lives, we should always make sure that they're based off of love and not fear. And so, if there is a listener out there who's trying to figure out should they try a mixed orientation marriage, I would say just make sure you're not doing it from a place of fear, because that's where I came from. I was afraid of the consequences if I didn't get married. I was afraid that I would never find love ever again. So just make sure that you have love in mind when you're making those types of decisions.
I love that. Really, really love that. Making faith-based versus fear-based.
Yes, yes,
Sister,
exactly.
my
Mm-hmm.
wife used to tell the YSAs in her YSI assignment, it's better to be single and wish you were married, rather be married and wish you were single. And there's so much cultural pressure to be married that I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we do get caught up in the culture, or we get based in fear-based decisions. This may be my only chance. But I think faith-based decisions would be, Heavenly Father's a plan for me. If I go to the 40,000-foot level, that plan, He loves me. He's going to take care of me. I need to continue to stay close to Him and make the very best decisions I can, and know that He's got my back. And in the 40,000 eternal perspective, everything's going to be okay. So I love that, Emily. Talk about Jess. Introduce your wife to our listeners.
Yeah, sure. So Jess and I met in the Seattle Women's Chorus. We both sing. I come from a very musical background, but she and I met and we hit it off pretty quickly. And I just knew pretty soon after she and I started to date, we both knew that we had found the person. It's really interesting because when I moved to Seattle, I moved to Seattle strictly because I felt a very strong prompting that I needed to move to Seattle. Like my gut was telling me I needed to move to Seattle. Um, and I didn't know why. I just knew. And so I ended up packing up all my things and moving to Seattle. And I was able to find a job once I got here. And I had some family members who took me under their wing and let me stay with them while I found my feet. But Jess and I often joke that like it was perfect timing. Like she and I didn't meet until I'd been here for a couple of years, but for the things that were happening in her life at the time and things that were happening in my life at the time, I I think that the universe really wanted me out here so that I could meet her. We we do have twins, so a boy and a girl. They're 9 years old. Um, Jess carried them. She in a previous marriage, they had a donor. They're fantastic kids, um, and yeah, Jess is just she's so loving. She's so supportive, and she was really excited when she found out that I was previously Mormon, or that I was raised Mormon, because she knew that Mormons were all about families, and she was really happy to know that I was gonna bring this family spirit to her and her kids. And we actually have family night every week. We we play a game, and we someone gets to choose the treat. So that's a tradition that I've brought along to our family. Um, so yeah, that's Jess in a nutshell. She's wonderful, and I'm so grateful to have her in my life.
That's really cool. I'm just, I just love the fact that Jess saw and wanted in her heart a strong family and recognized your Mormon heritage, your Mormon experience, your service in the church. That's part of something that was hardwired into you and would come to the marriage, and probably part of the reason she fell in love with you. And she's got these kids, and of course she would want a wonderful companion to help raise these twins that are now their mother and are helping to raise them in full
Mm-hmm.
companionship. And that's just, to me, um, I recognize we all, you, me, and our listeners know your marriage is outside the teachings of our church, but I recognize from a pragmatic standpoint that the closeness of your family and the commitment of you and your spouse and children being raised in a home with two committed parents, they're committed to each other, is great. And and it just seems like our world would be so much better if every child was being raised in a family like yours with two committed parents that are deeply committed to their children. And I think a lot of, and some might debate me on that your family's not as strong a family or it's not the ideal situation, but I just leave all that at the Savior's feet. And I want your family to succeed. I want your marriage to succeed. I don't wouldn't rejoice if your marriage didn't succeed. It wouldn't sort of validate my own position. Any two people that, decide to go into a civil covenant or a covenant with God through a civil wedding, however they're looking at that, committing to each other, to me, I want those marriages to succeed. And I've learned to just be happy for your happiness. And it doesn't cost me anything as a committed Latter-day Saint. I don't feel I'm selling out our doctrine or condoning something out. I just feel like I'm extending the grace that my restored gospel has asked me to extend to all the human family as they go forward. Are you okay with all that, or any thoughts to add to that?
Um, I appreciate that. Thank you for holding that belief. That means a lot that you would have so much faith and trust in our marriage, because we do our best. And other than my own mother, I've never known a mother that is as amazing as a mother as Jess. She loves those kids with all of her heart, and she had to go through a lot in order to get pregnant and give birth. That was quite the process for her. So yeah, I just thank you for being so loving and supportive of us and of the other LGBTQ families that are out there.
And you're very kind, and I just honor your personal revelation. One of the, we are built on a church that values personal revelation. In the book, I talk about Elder Uchtdorf's quote that Joseph Smith, we honor his personal revelation that we got. And in the book, he talks about Elder Uchtdorf in a conference talk honoring those that feel their path is outside the church. And I think that's a fairly thoughtful quote that just tries to bring us together as the same human family and honors personal agency. But my personal revelation doesn't give me the ability to judge your personal revelation. And keeping my covenants doesn't give me the ability or give me the right to really judge, are you keeping your covenants? And so I just honor the personal revelation you're receiving, even if it's different than the personal revelation I've received or people that I know receive. I could say that you're being deceived by Satan and this is a sign of the last days, but I don't know enough about, I don't know that I received personal revelation to judge, to be able to say that about you. I do believe Satan's real, and I do believe he wants to separate us from God and cause us to make bad decisions, but that doesn't mean I have the right to sort of take that belief and apply it to you. I just feel like my job as a committed Latter-day Saint is to extend grace and mourn and comfort and bear and support you. So you kind of know all that, but that's just for our listeners how I navigate this space. And you may be okay with that, listeners, or you may not be okay with that. It's a complicated space. And my goal in these podcasts and in the book and my personal ministry is not to have everybody agree with everything I say or a guest says, but just to have a conversation about really difficult topics that try to find common ground that bring us together so that people like Emily and Jess, we see them as two wonderful women doing the best they can with circumstances we don't face. Talk about parents. Most of my guests have had parents that have, this is maybe 10 years this has been going on, or 8 years going on. And my guess is your parents, like all LDS parents, have kind of gone through phases and are in a better spot now than they were the first day this happened or you came out to them. Just share with us anything you want to share about your parents and maybe as a second question, any advice you'd like to give to LDS parents that are listening that have LGBTQ children.
Yeah, sure. I extend a lot of grace to my parents and to my family because when I when I came out, it was a huge it was part of a massive transformation in my life because like I said, I'd had this realization that I'd been making a lot of choices in my life based off of fear. And I'd been kind of on autopilot. Like I'd just been doing all of the things that I'd always been taught to do without really giving it much thought. And I kind of slammed on the brakes and I just said, wait a minute, I need to make sure that I'm making decisions for myself. And so not only did I come out of the closet, but at that time I stopped going to church. That's when I started questioning whether or not I was going to remain married to the man I was married to at the time. So it was like this huge shift happened in me. And I think my whole family was kind of blindsided of like, what is going on with Emily? um, like, uh, there, there were just a lot of questions. Um, and it was hard for me because here I was feeling free and feeling a sense of happiness like I had never felt before because I was finally accepting this part of myself. And my family was not on the same page at that time. And that was really, really difficult for me. But I say that fully understanding why, because like I said, it was like this huge shock to them. I mean, and that being said, my relationship with my family today is really good. It took time and it took effort from both sides because I, there were times where I got angry and I got aggressive and I got pushy with my family. And I regret that. I really regret that. Um, like just kind of trying to boss them into loving me and accepting me and being okay with this journey that I was on. That was not the right approach. And so eventually I've been through quite a bit of therapy.
It's honest.
And therapy helped me to learn how to better communicate with my family, to learn how to better communicate with my parents, to build bridges of understanding. And and so by doing that, by coming from a place of love with them, I feel like my relationship with my family today is pretty strong. Even though I'm in Seattle and most of my siblings are in Utah. I do have one sister who lives out in Virginia. But I don't get to see them often. But when I do get to see them, I'm really so happy and so grateful. And we stay in touch through social media really well. So I have noticed that when I'm connected with my family and when I'm talking with them regularly, my emotional well-being is much better. Like it's like I can feel my familial roots are when those are being nourished, the foundation of my whole life feels better. So it was rough being kind of separated from my family for a while there. But over the last few years, that separation has, I've come back together with my family. I feel like another reason I was prompted to move to Seattle was actually because when I moved to Seattle, it helped me appreciate my family even more. I cherish the time that I do get to spend with them. So it's been a journey from both sides. I'd say that's, if there's one takeaway from all of my rambling, it is that my family has come a long way and I have also come a long way. There has to be a bridge built, and you have to make sure that you're approaching things from a loving perspective. Getting angry about things, getting pushy about things, that's just not the way to go. You've got to make sure that you're being loving and understanding.
That's a great segment. And I've had a therapist talk about storming, and that's sort of when the new reality becomes aware in a family situation. And there's kind of this storming period. And I don't know if that's a word that works for in every situation, because that implies a lot of tension and I'm thinking of dark clouds and wind and thunder because I'm thinking weather. But there's some of that occurs when someone comes out, or the realities of your situation become aware to the whole family. And I think the principles are communication and honesty and vulnerability. And you said some other really wonderful things. You said, I'm emotionally better when I'm connected with my family. And I just think we're wired for connection, Emily. And so we're not meant to be alone. as members of the human
Yeah.
family. So I love that you are connected to your family. You have a big family. I don't know how many nieces and nephews you have, but
A lot.
a lot, with that many siblings and your own two children. And I have to think your own two children are blessed by your parents that taught you
Mm.
wonderful parenting principles that you are teaching to your own children. And so if your parents are listening, great job, parents. You may have some days you wish you could do over, and this may not be exactly what you thought would be your family story, but to me, it's a family success story. And your daughter, Emily, to me, is doing a great job navigating really complicated issues. Her sexual orientation is outside of her control, doing the best she can. And I just admire what you're doing to keep the family circle together. And I hope in some ways this is a payday, just hearing your wonderful daughter talk honestly and openly and help so many people. And I don't sense a lot of anger in your daughter. There may have been some angry times. Pain usually results in angers, but I'm sensing a pretty mature, thoughtful, healed person. So maybe it's been your prayers and your work and Emily's work and therapy. We need Jesus and a therapist, I've always said. And to me, this is just a family success story, all around. And just the things we hope for as parents is our families close together and learning from each other. And so, but I recognize there's probably been, like, I know my role as a parent is sometimes choppy and there are things I wish I could do over, but that's okay. Um, so, uh, any advice for parents of new? Maybe you said some. Anything else comes to mind, Emily? Just advice for parents that might be listening to a podcast for the first time, either suspecting their child's LGBTQ or just learning this.
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that question because I have a lot of friends now who have teenagers, friends and cousins and family members who have teenagers, and some of them have shared that their children have come out as LGBTQ. And I think one thing that I would love for parents to understand and for members of the church to understand is the church's stance on LGBTQ issues is difficult. It's a really difficult pill to swallow because you're surrounded by people who are dating. They're encouraged to date. They're encouraged to find someone to marry, and you're not. You're not necessarily told like, no, you cannot. You absolutely cannot date, but you're encouraged. You're encouraged to remain celibate, and that's a really tough pill to swallow. So I think understanding that your child or your fellow congregation member is they are allowed to receive their own personal revelation. And Richard, you've already touched on this even just during this episode, but everybody can receive their own personal revelation as far as what their path might be. And just have love and compassion and understanding. If your child decides that they want to date people of the same gender, please love them and support them in that choice, because it's so difficult to even fathom the thought of living a life alone, like without that companionship. At least it is for me. Some people, they might be able to get, they might be okay. Everybody has their own path, but just whatever your child or the congregation member decides to do, I think just love them and support them. That's and if your child seems like, if you see a similar pattern of what I talked about at the beginning of this episode, like they make a friend and then that friendship fizzles and they seem really, really down about it, like listen to them, find out more about how they're feeling. Just also being like every once in a while, maybe reading a church article together as a family about LGBTQ church members. Make it, because the truth is that today there are a lot more stories out there about members of the church who are LGBTQ. And it's a reality that kids need to be aware of. Like, this is a real thing, and it's okay if you feel this way. That way, 23-year-old Emily doesn't feel so helpless and lost and alone that she just doesn't want to live anymore. Like, make it an option, make it okay for them to feel this way. Make sure that they're aware that this is a path that some people take. Obviously, you as faithful parents, you may not want your children to pursue the path of like deciding to marry someone of the same gender. And that's okay. What I'm saying is make it okay for them to identify as LGBTQ. Even just that one little step can make such a big difference in somebody's life.
It's a great segment, great advice. And I love that advice, Emily, because every parent can do that. You don't need to be a therapist. You just listen and try to create a safety that they open up and then to love them. That's the most consistent personal revelation that in the book that I've published, because there's a lot of stories from LDS parents, and they rightly so receive personal revelation for their children, but that personal revelation is very similar to what you've just shared. At the end of the day, my job as a parent is to love. And parents are usually pretty good at that once they feel like they've sort of gotten permission from God or to do that. Because a lot of parents, and you may have seen that in your own parents, they hold back and they don't quite know what to do in this situation. But most parents just get to the point, my job is to love. We are part of mortality is personal agency. That's such a core part of our church teachings. My job is to honor other people's personal agency and just love and leave it at the Savior's feet and not try to determine right now your eternal standing with God, or even the idea that you might not be part of our eternal family. Yeah, you're not, keeping church teachings, but I think we can even just say, I'm not going to sort of right now conclude that you're going to be outside the family circle for eternity, because I believe in our heavenly parents that want to do everything they can to get all of their children back to them. And you face unique circumstances that other people don't face. And so it's not it's not sort of dismissing our doctrine. It's really owning our doctrine. I still invite everybody to stay. All the good in the church all the good in my life comes from living the teachings of the church. And I recognize people that separate themselves from the church often live a lot of church teachings. You're having family night. You're in a deeply committed relationship. You're not on the club scene, I don't think. And
I am not.
and it seems like that's the perfect environment for these two kids that need two committed parents. And so I think we're just the same human family, and you're doing a great job. We're kind of at the hour. We're at the ending time. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, Emily?
I guess I would just say, this is my story and everyone's story is different. But I think it's just important to remember that key component of personal revelation, the ability for people to feel the Spirit in their own way, whatever that might look like. Richard, I also just want to thank you for being an advocate. I've read the first half of your book,
Well,
and
thank you.
it's wonderful. Yeah, it's I remember when I stumbled across you on Facebook a few years ago, I was like, wow, who is this person that is so loving of the LGBTQ community and is still so faithful in the church? And I think that you live a very great example, and your example brings a lot of hope to a lot of LGBTQ members of the church. So thank you.
You're very kind, Emily. So I'm just so glad to have you on the podcast today, Emily. So on behalf of Emily Tomkinson,
Tomkinson.
Tomkinson, and her wife, Jess, this is Richard Ostler signing off on another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.